Whoops, hang on. Just there we go. Hopefully you can hear me. Yes, right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, a Jacobite Miscellany. What might I have in store for you? Several different topics, rather strange ones, one of which includes the author of this little chap. I'm sure you recognise him, and you're all thinking I've gone nuts, but more about Peter Rabbit later. I'm going to start with something quite close to my home or heart, an old photograph album of my mother's, rather battered little leather album. I was flicking through it a few weeks ago, and the last photograph in the back, and it's not a good image, you can probably barely see what you're looking at. And in case you don't know what that blurry black and white picture is, my mother has written Swarkestone Bridge near Derby, near Stanton by Bridge, where I was born. And I immediately thought, oh, hang on, Swarkestone Bridge? That's everything to do with 1745 and the Jacobite army marching southwards. And indeed, when I pulled up all my information, it most certainly was. And what an amazing bridge this is. I'm going to show you a modern day picture, one I've just taken recently of the first part of the bridge, because this is, I believe, the longest bridge in England, and not the bit you're looking at. That's just one very small part of it, because after the crossing of the River Trent, which is what you're looking at there, and here is the River Trent, the bridge, in inverted commas, continues as a sort of causeway, a raised causeway. Where are we before I go any further? Well, we're 6 miles south of Derby, on the A514. And of course, many of you will know that this was the closest to London that Bonnie Prince Charlie, sorry if I may call him that, and the army reached on their quest to reclaim the throne for the Stuarts. This bridge is sitting, as I say, just south of Derby, indeed. It's an ancient bridge. It seems to have been built probably in the 13th century, and today it is a Grade 1 listed monument, and it is also scheduled, so it has some protection on it. In 1204, it was referred to as the Pont de Cordy. I'm sure my French is not very good. Please forgive me. During the time of the building of that bridge and its subsequent causeway, which we're going to see more pictures of in a moment, it's been modified, it's been altered, repaired and rebuilt, you might guess, as it's been standing there for quite some time. It was described as the King's Highway between Derby and Coventry. And I mentioned that it's the longest bridge, if you will. Well, it's just under a mile long, according to one guidebook, with 17 arches, 6 of which remain unaltered since their medieval building. And this structure is primarily of sandstone. So let's just, before we go any further with that, I've shown you the main bridge, and right next to that bridge, I'll just show you that picture again, because you can just see there's a red brick building there, and that is an inn, which is called the Crew and Harper, and there it is on a nice sunny day. When I visited it, I particularly wanted to visit it, not just because it was lunchtime, but there's a monument in the grounds of that inn. There we go. I'm standing next to it, a cairn, as you can see, on which is a plaque. This cairn marks the furthest point south reached by the Jacobite army of Prince Charles Edward Stuart on the 4th of December 1745. and it was erected by the Charles Edward Stuart Society and Marston's Brewery on the 250th anniversary. There's a close-up of the plaque for you to have a look at. So that sort of sets the scene at one end of this bridge. And then it goes on. And so it's a series of arches. And you can, today in modernity, you can actually walk along through the fields alongside and parallel to this bridge, watching the traffic working its way carefully. And it has to at times, because this is a very, very narrow structure, as you might imagine, wasn't really designed for our modern transport. But I love ancient structures, so I was particularly excited as I got further along and was looking at all these different arches. You'll have to excuse the modern barbed wire, but there you can see here two pointed arches that have been sort of supported in more recent times with a brick inner arch, if you will. And some of the arches indeed did look just like that. And here's a close-up of one. This road is still in use, of course, as the traffic's still going backwards and forwards. What else can I tell you? The section crossing the main flow of the river was destroyed in floods in 1795, but quickly rebuilt. And as I say, it has been widened several times in places, apparently. The first widening in 1799, but it is still undersized for our modern traffic. And cars are unable to pass in several places. Just have another look at one of the other arches, slightly different shape here. This structure must have taken some building. Those lovely green fields that are on either side of this current bridge would, I think, not have been so nice and drained and green in medieval times. I imagine the ground would have been really quite swampy and difficult to work. So it's quite an achievement. And underneath at least one of the arches, you can see this beautiful rib work, which indeed is original. The weight limit on this bridge today is 7.5 tons, apparently. And the bridge is actually within the parish of Stanton by Bridge, and that's the village, indeed, where my mother was born. A little look at the walling, or the oh dear, the causeway, sort of in between those arches. You can see some projecting stones there. And again, and I imagine that those lower courses are part of the medieval work, and that the upper courses through time have probably been altered to some degree. Stanton by Bridge is literally just round the corner. Once you're heading south and you've gone over the causeway, it's just a few yards up around the corner, and here it is, just literally off the main road. And those cottages in the background, one of those cottages is where Mum was born. So I sort of had a nice warm feeling when I discovered that, because I've always been looking for some sort of a connection with anything really to do with this. Some of you will know I'm still looking for my Polish connection with the Sobieski family. I think I'm on a hiding to nothing there. But anyway, that I don't know, it just gave me such a touch with history to go and visit that bridge, a bridge that my mother would have known growing up, and although she didn't stay at Stanton that long, but she's obviously gone back and taken a photograph in adulthood, and a bridge now lodged in my heart too. So that was a grade 1 listed bridge, and from one monument protected by this listing to another, it's got an interesting name. It's called Huber Stand. What on earth is that, you're wondering? Well, it's connected with a very large house. Here it is on the cover of the book. To do with the very big house. Hope you can see that. This is indeed Wentworth Woodhouse, It's a massive, massive building in South Yorkshire. And the stand is this strange monument rising out of the woodland, which is in the ground of Wentworth Woodhouse. Indeed, there are a number of tall columns and monuments in the grounds of this big house. Huber, because that's the name of the little hamlet close by, and apparently a stand is an ancient word describing an elevated place from which to observe a hunt. Now, I can tell you that Huber Stand does indeed stand on an elevation. You get quite a view from it, and particularly from the top of it. So far, so good. Here it is on a rather grey day. It's a very strange shaped monument, very fancy door, and doesn't matter which side you're looking at it, it is still that strange shape. Here's the front again, but if I show you, it's triangular or pyramidal, shall we say. So here's another one of those three sides. Oops, try not to get the glare. What can I tell you? It's 30 metres high, this monument. It's grade 2 star listed. And as I said, it's in Wentworth Woodhouse grounds. It was designed for the Whig aristocrat Thomas Watson Wentworth, Earl of Malton, who later became the first Marquess, that's how you pronounce it, of Rockingham. And it was specifically to commemorate the crushing of the 1745 rebellion. Oh gosh, because, if you don't believe me, the plaque tells you. I'm just going to hold that a minute and then I'll read what it actually says. It was, this building was put up in 1748, hence that date. It cost £3,000. It's a lot of money back then, isn't it? And so that inscription says, this pyramidal building was erected by His Majesty's most dutiful subject, Thomas Malton, Marquess of Rockingham, in grateful respect to the preserver of our religion, laws, and liberties, King George II, who by the blessing of God, having subdued a most unnatural rebellion in Britain, anno 1746, maintains the balance of power and settles a just and honourable peace in Europe. Gosh, so there you have it. Now, according to the guidebook, I believe that this is the only memorial to that English victory that you might find in this country. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just quoting from what the guidebook says. Well, I had to go and visit it, didn't I? Because just occasionally it is open to the public and you can climb the 150 steps to the summit, as I did a few weeks ago. So you've got a spiral staircase to go around and a warning, because if I remember correctly, there's no handrail or rope or anything. So, and if you don't like heights, this is probably not the place to go, because when you step out on the top, you are a long way up, 30 metres up indeed. But with fantastic views over the South Yorkshire countryside and indeed the land owned by the Wentworth estate. And at each of the three corners, there is one of these, which I think originally had a sundial on the top. Again, this building, like Swarkestone Bridge, is made of sandstone. What else? I've said 150 steps. And in fact, from the summit of Huber Stand, you can indeed look down on the big house. There it is. Gosh. And that must have cost some money to build, wasn't it? Sir Thomas, that we've just mentioned, he inherited Wentworth Woodhouse in 1723, so just before the rebellion. He died in 1750, just after. And he spent, are you ready for this, £90,000 building Wentworth Woodhouse. I can't imagine what that translates into today from those days, but it's a few million, I think. Gosh. in April 1746, he is quoted as saying, "I presented His Majesty with one bunch of Frontignac grapes and one of muscadine, perfectly ripe, which he eat the day after he received the news of the Duke's victory over the rebels in Scotland." And Wentworth Woodhouse became the largest and most expensive house in England. So, gosh, there we have it. A very strange shaped monument built at tremendous cost by the owner of that land to commemorate, yes, the failing of the Jacobite rebellion. Well, where are we going now? Not to a well, we are going to a building, but it's the letters that were sent to this building that are particularly interesting. We're going to Nostell Priory, which is just up the road from where I live. It isn't a priory as such. In fact, it's a National Trust property today. There you have it. The big house was built in the 1700s on the site of an Augustinian priory at Nostell. And we're on the road between Wakefield and Pontefract. Right, just a minute, sorry. And I've managed to find another picture of Nostell. It's not much different from the one you've seen, except this is the rear elevation. So again, we're talking about money here, aren't we? This is the Wynn family, W-I-N-N. But just to mention that, as I say, Nostell Priory, the medieval monastic site, which was founded in the early 12th century, of course, as most sites were in the 1500s. Henry VIII dissolved the monasteries, didn't he? Most of them lost their roofs at the very least and lost a lot more besides. Sadly, there is no trace of any building today from that period at Nostell, even though the early owners of Nostell Priory, after the dissolution, actually moved into part of the structures there. And it was only from the 1700s that a new house was planned. But we have no illustrations. I have not been able to find, I've never seen any engravings or, paintings of Nostell, the monastic site. And if you go there today hunting for anything medieval, if you can get into the stables, in one of the stables, the loose boxes, can you see a jumble of stones here, some of which are dating to that medieval date. But there must be a whole lot more medieval stonework somewhere buried at Nostell. Perhaps we need time team. Well, why are we going to Nostell? Because we are, I'll get it right in a minute, let me find him. Sir Rowland Wynne, who was, at the time of what we're interested in, he was the High Sheriff of West Yorkshire. Here he is, quite a, I don't know if you can see that, and I'm having difficulty, but here he is. That is Sir Rowland Wynne. I hope I didn't just call him Thomas, but he's definitely Sir Rowland Wynne, High Sheriff, as they say, of Yorkshire at the time of the 1745-46. It was appointed the High Sheriff in 1731, and during my work at Nostell as a volunteer, because as I say, it's a National Trust property today, and for a few years I was a volunteer there, and I did quite a bit of research. I was actually researching the stables, but I did go into Wakefield and to the archive, which is the Nostell archive, is held there at the History Centre. And there are a lot of documents and, more importantly, a lot of letters being sent to Sir Rowland Wynne with dates like April 1746, for instance. Yes, quite exciting. Now, the only problem is, obviously, I don't have the real documents here, but I'm just going to show you some of the spidery writing, if you can see that, because I've had to try and make sense of what some of these letters say. So there's a whole raft of letters in different writings. Some of the writings are quite easy to read, well, relatively easy, and some are much more difficult. So what little snippets can I give you? That first letter, I only just looked at it today, and it's actually mentioning, and we do have a date of November the 5th or the 15th, I'm not sure which, 1745, and it's mentioning that the rebels are about Dalkeith. And whoever is writing this to Sir Rowland is saying he doesn't quite like the account of our horse and foot, that no one has joined us except Thornton, who is very valiant, which is interesting. So quite what that's about, but let's have a look. What can I read you? Here's a letter dated Berwick, 20th of April, 1746. And it says, this moment arrived an express with the news that the Duke has got a complete victory over the rebels at Loudon Hill near Inverness. Most of the Highlanders are cut to pieces, and the remainder are fled. All their cannon are taken. Lord George Murray, Lord Kilmarnock, and Sir John Wedderburn, with the French ambassador, are taken prisoners. Now, I was rooting through some of these other letters, and I came across a reference actually to Lord Kilmarnock, who, although he's a prisoner, it looks as if he's trying to do a bit of a deal with the government, because after Culloden, he and some of the government, obviously because he's still a prisoner, are on the hunt for Charles, and it is suggested, I wish I could remember which letter this was in, that if Lord Kilmarnock can lead the government troops to Charlie, that he will get his land back, which is quite interesting. And how true that would be, I don't know. What else have we got? Because Sir Rowland, as I say, was the High Sheriff, it looks as if some of these letters were that they've got gaps where there are significant dates or numbers that might have been put in there, because I suppose if these letters fall into wrong hands, they don't want the enemy to know, shall we say. But this letter says, whereas I have received notice to provide carriage for conveying the baggage belonging to His Majesty's forces under the command of Marshal Wade from Wetherby to, but it doesn't tell us where. These are therefore in His Majesty's name to will and require you to cause sufficient wagons within your constabulary, each carriage to consist of 6 able horses to attend at on the day of December next at, and even the time we don't get to know, in the morning here of fail, not given under my hand and seal this day of something or other, December 1745. Interesting. And as I say, so there are a number, many letters here, and some of them are quite lengthy. In one of them, it mentions some figures. This is interesting. I'll just read the end of it. It says, the Highlanders are yet, and this I must put this in context, because unlike most of the letters which are dated April, so that's after Culloden, so much news was heading south. Oh, and while we're talking of that, just think about this, how did that news travel? Maybe by outriders, but if it was going on the coach, well, just to give you some idea, that in the early 1700s, a coach from York to London would take 4 days. I mean, we have instant availability, don't we, now, to get in touch with people, but how very different it must have been then. So this is dated the 23rd of September. Now, this is after Preston Pans, isn't it? I'm not going to read the whole letter, it's quite lengthy, but the end says, the Highlanders are yet on the links of Leith and in the park, where it is said they will encamp tomorrow for some time, but that is uncertain. But that is uncertain. They are preparing for a long march, a message being sent to the magistrates of Edinburgh to provide 1,000, I think it said, tents and 6,000 pairs of shoes. Wow, so that's for the Jacobite army, and that information has somehow been intercepted, and it's ended up at Sir Roland Wynn's house at Nostell Priory. Well, there's a whole raft of these letters, as I say, and some of them are so difficult. The photocopies, to be fair, some of them are not clear. I guess the only thing I can do is to, when I've time, go back to the archive and actually handwrite out from the originals what I can glean. And I know that I didn't look at all the letters. I didn't have time to look at them all. So who knows what other juicy little snippets there might be. Gosh, so that's Sir Roland Wynn and letters appertaining to the rebellion arriving in West Yorkshire, no less. Right, so that's Nostell. Oh my goodness, right, yes. Now bear with me a moment, because the information for this next section is because I'm not using PowerPoint, I'm having to set out my books and papers and goodness knows what surrounding the laptop here, and it's quite complicated. And this particular next story is even more complicated, and I might not get things in the right order, but please bear with me. Old guidebooks. I like keeping old guidebooks, and this is a very good reason why. I visited this property a few weeks ago. This is Newby Hall. We are in North Yorkshire, between Ripon and Boroughbridge. And why did I want to go there? This is their old guidebook, I should stress. In fact, I've got two old guidebooks. And, well, I found an intriguing statue. This guidebook is in black and white, but I'll just show you, there we go, the statue there. And indeed, a similar picture, but in colour, is in their next guidebook, which I only discovered that I had recently. So there's that same statue, but in colour this time. And yet, when we look at their new guidebook, there is no mention. There's nothing in here. There are beautiful pictures of the house. There's been a Newby Hall here since at least the 1300s, when it was the property of the Newby family, and it comes through various people. The man we're perhaps interested in is William Weddell. I have a picture of him. I'm going to explain why I'm interested in that statue in just a moment, but let me just show you this man, because he, in the 1700s, was the owner of Newby Hall. He was obviously quite a wealthy gentleman, because he took himself off all around Europe, as many of the wealthy did, and he ended up in Italy, and he ordered a whole load of Carrara marble statues and structures and things to be delivered back to his house at Newby. And indeed, I haven't been round the house, but I know within the house there are many, many marble statues in there. But then, as I say, there is this one statue standing out in the grounds. I'll just show you him again. Here's one I took off the internet. It's an imposing statue, don't you think? So we have a man on a horse, but the horse seems to be trampling somebody underfoot. Just go back to the house itself a minute, just to show you. Here's the frontage of it. rather nice. And our statue in the glorious sunshine, there it is. But don't worry, there is a plaque under that statue. I'll just show you that. And that is telling us that according to this plaque, this statue is a statue of John Sobieski, King of Poland. Now, does the word Sobieski ring a bell with you all? I'm sure it does when we think of this beautiful young lady. There we go, because that's Clementina Sobieska, isn't it? Who was granddaughter indeed of John Sobieski, sorry. And Clementina, of course, is the mother of Charles Edward Stuart. Charles was half Polish, just like me, which is why I take a big interest, I guess, in him. So, a statue in North Yorkshire, which with the plaque that says we've got John Sobieski on his horse trampling a Turk, that it was bought by the statue, that is, Sir Robert Viner in 1675 at Leghorn, which is in Italy. He altered it to represent Charles II trampling Oliver Cromwell, and it was erected in various places in London before it eventually made its way up north to the Viners' properties, first in Lincolnshire and then to Newby. Now, that's all well and good. The problem is it gets a bit murky now, because that early guidebook and one or two other books say that there is some doubt cast onto whether this really is the statue of Jan Sobieski at all. There he is again. Oh dear. So trying to solve this one was really, oh gosh, quite complicated. Just show you another image. It really is an arresting statue, I have to say. It has suffered that you can, when you get close up to it, you can see there have been some mends and breaks. And here's the poor soul being trampled on underneath. Of course, there will be some breaks if indeed Sir Robert had the statue altered from Jan Sobieski to Charles II. How true all this is, I don't know. Now, when I look up Jan Sobieski, I discover that actually there are many statues of him, quite a few of them in Poland, and he's just one of them. Now, does that look a bit like our statue? Well, yes and no. We can see that there is a person being trampled on. I mean, it's not exactly the same copy at all. The clothing is all different. The horse has got its both front legs, I think, off the ground. Yes, I'm looking closely at it now, and it has, whereas our statue does not. So what's going on here? And then, as I say, what's this to do with Charles II? Well, there are apparently two equestrian statues of Charles II, of which this is one. Doesn't that look quite like our statue at Newby? But there is a statue made of bronze in the upper ward at Windsor Castle, which was made in the 1670s. And it was inspired by a statue of Charles I, apparently, and it sits on a marble plinth. And then we've got this one that I've just shown you, Charles II trampling Cromwell. Now, what can I tell you? This is where it gets all complicated. The original sculpture, this one we've been, not that London one, this original sculpture was originally, as I say, made in Italy. Supposedly it's Jan Sobieski, but it predates the famous battle that this is supposed to be portraying by at least a decade, according to what I've read. It may have been made for the King of Poland or a Polish ambassador in London, but it was bought by Robert Viner, Sir Robert Viner, first baronet, owner, remember, of Newby, in the 1670s. He was a strong supporter of Charles II. And as I mentioned earlier, it was he supposedly who remodeled this statue to make it look like Charles II, and that the figure is interpreted as a Cromwell, although the figure on the statue still looks very Turkish with a turban on the poor trampled man. Viner apparently had offered in 1668 to donate a statue of Charles for the Royal Exchange, but this was rejected. Viner was Lord Mayor of London from 1674 to 75. He presented the statue to the parish of St. Stephen Walbrook, and it was then installed in the Stocks Market near Cornhill. But it was removed in 1739 when the construction of the mansion house meant that the statue was in the way. It was given to Viner's grandnephew, also a Robert Viner, and initially erected at their properties in Lincolnshire at Gortby. And in 1883, this statue finally arrived at Newby Hall. Yes. So when I went to Newby, nobody could really tell me much more than I've just told you now. What about Jan Sobieski? As it's supposed to be him that that the statue is of. Well, he's quite an arresting character, I think you'll agree, just looking at that. What can I tell you? Well, he was the King of Poland and Grand Duke of Lithuania between 1674 until his death. And born into Polish nobility, of course, university educated, toured Europe and so on and so forth. He became a famous soldier, fighting in various battles and wars against the Ottoman Empire. What else? Yes, so this famous battle that he's remembered for, after that battle in 1683, the Pope hailed Jan Sobieski as the saviour of Western Christendom. And somewhere in this book, might have a picture of here's yet another image of Jan Sobieski on his horse. So there are lots and lots of pictures, although again, look, the horse has got both its front legs rising up. Behind every great man, there is also a very good woman. I think you'll all agree. And unusually, Jan Sobieski was very happily married. He married, I think, a French lady, but the Polish translation of her name is Maria Kazimierz Sobieska, but she was known as Marysienka. And Jan and Marysienka, and here she is on horseback, looking very grand. They had 14 children. So it does sound indeed a happy marriage. And unusually, he would refer to her when, about to go out to battle. He would sort of include Marysienka in his sort of discussions about all of this. Sadly, in his later life, he suffered from poor health. He became quite obese. He's buried at Wawel Cathedral in Krakow. And but quite a hero, I think, for the Polish people. Again, just look at that face. And, my Polish grandfather, I look at this picture of him and I think, now, could there be a connection? As his life story is quite amazing, but I'm not here to talk about that. So, Charles Edward Stuart's mother's grandfather may or may not be on, a study of the statue at Newby Hall. It's certainly an intriguing story. But whatever the case, we will move on from that. Oh, that's a big pile of bits and pieces. But isn't it interesting, as I say, that guidebooks change, and that the new guidebook, and I just stressed, there's sort of no photographs, even though we see at the beginning, look, a lovely picture of the entrance of Newby, but it's just off that picture that the statue is, and there's no mention of it at all. It's been airbrushed out of history. Gosh. Now where are we going? Ah, yes, right. We're going to a church. We are in Cumbria, in South Lakeland. We are in a little backwater, really. We're just north of Newby Bridge. It's a very pretty church in a little village called Finsthwaite, which is a village that spans along a narrow lane for at least a mile. It's made up of little cottages and farms today. This is a picture I took of, I used to work for an American walking company, and I used to do tours in the Lake District in Scotland, and so we would take our group indeed to this church. Why? Well, apparently it's the home of a last resting place of the Lakeland Princess, as she's become known. Just bear with me while I reorganise my table. And gosh, if ever there was a myth that has been made, indeed, a whole booklet has been written on this, the Finsthwaite Princess, the making of a myth, by Janet Martin, a local historian, who has sort of rather debunked both the man who wrote this booklet, Tom Croft. We've got this is an old booklet with a picture of the church there on there, and here is the grave that we're interested in, because supposedly this is where the Finsthwaite Princess is buried. Oh gosh. Okay, you say, well, what's that got to do with anything? Oh dear, but just the myth-making machine really gets into its own, because supposedly this is the illegitimate daughter of you-know-who, Charles Edward Stuart, and possibly, and I've lost a picture. Oh gosh, which book are we in? And Clementina Walkinshaw. Do you remember Clementina, who Charles met initially at Bannockburn? In fact, he said that she nursed him when he really wasn't well at the time, around about the time of the Battle of Falkirk. Here is Clementina. But much later on in Charles's life, the bit that not everybody knows about, when Charles ended up back in Europe, he, after several disastrous relationships with women, remembered Clementina, and they got back together. For several years they lived as man and wife, always on the move, of course, always with an alias. Gosh, what a life they had. Well, right, so Tom Cross and lots of other people have sort of dreamt up this whole story about this mysterious lady. Do we know any facts about her? Well, yes, we do. We know that she was buried in that churchyard, because there is her gravestone. That she was a spinster, and she died May the 16th, 1771. Her name, this is interesting, she's Clementina Johannes Sobieski Douglas of Waterside. I think I've got a little picture of Waterside. Is a very, very old farmhouse on the edge, well, just out of Finsthwaite. It still stands today. There it is. And apparently, from out of nowhere, because there seems to be a mystery as to where Clementina came from, but she's ended up dying here. Now, she didn't live at Waterside House on her own. She lived with a Captain Douglas. Was he her father? Was he a relative? We don't know. Even more interestingly, when Clementina dies, Captain Douglas moves away. So we we really don't know. But as I say, that doesn't stop the myth mongerers, making much of this. Because actually, at the bottom of Clementina's grave, where's my picture? Here we go. There's a colour one for you. Here I am next to it, spouting forth. But at the base of that simple cross there are the words, "Behold, thy king cometh." Now, this gravestone was put up long after Clementina was buried. In fact, I think 1913, if I remember correctly. And it was a Canon Townley, a local landowner, who had become very interested in this whole story. And as they say, before you know where you are, things that you cannot corroborate and that have no proof are being banded around as fact, including the fact that apparently this grave was dug into, and locks of blonde hair and some blue ribbons were found. That isn't quite correct, i.e. it wasn't that grave where those things were found, and so on and so forth. There's even much more recently, I was reading, that apparently during World War II, the Germans might have wanted to come and dig up, exhume this body and check if it was indeed a Stuart. And oh gosh, and even more recently, apparently the Duke of Edinburgh and the royal family were also interested. None of this there is no proof of any of this, but you can see how just, somebody who local people perhaps were a little curious about, suddenly this story, intriguing story, including this 1745 date, which certainly wasn't linked with Clementina in the early stories about her within the Finsthwaite area, but it's all been added on to, because of course it has. Doesn't it make a tale? Gosh. Oh dear. So we don't know much about Clementina. We don't know how old she was. We do know that she signed a document, and that for her to have been able to do that, she must have been aged at least 21. But more than that, really, we cannot say for sure. As they say, the lady that has written this has sort of debunked most of what has been said by all those other people before. But it's interesting that in the Finsthwaite area, apparently, according to Janet Martin, who's written that document, there are in the immediate neighbourhood 2 small crystal hearts. In the centre of each is the silver head of a man believed to be Charles Edward Stuart. And indeed, Canon Townley owned a medallion commemorating the marriage of James Stuart and Clementina Sobieska. So little snippets and little things, but people, as I say, have built onto this story, and the whole thing has been blown out of all proportion. And people are still going to that grave today, as indeed I did, just to try and set the record straight. I mean, it is intriguing, because don't we all want to know, well, who was she? And look at those names that she was given. Clementina, well, it is suggested that that was a common name that Jacobite sympathisers might have given their children. Johannes Sobieski, and that even Douglas, some books will say that Charles Edward Stuart, that was one of the alias names that he used during his, difficult life, where he was having to go under all sorts of pseudonyms and different names as he moved around, never being able to stay in one place for any lengths of time. So could it be, it has been suggested that perhaps Captain Douglas and Clementina, maybe Captain Captain Douglas had been a soldier with Charles Edward Stuart's army, and that he and his daughter perhaps, at the end of all that, didn't perhaps want to hang around in Scotland. Maybe they came south over the border and took up residence in a real little backwater of a place. It's possible. Maybe we'll never know. But it's an intriguing story nonetheless. And as I say, people are still going to the grave. And whether it's got anything to do with this man, certainly I don't think it can be any illegitimate child of Charles Edward Stuart. I don't go with that one. But, people will love these stories. Now, at the beginning, I think I held up my little friend. Oh, we can make a myth right now. Is Peter Rabbit wearing a Jacobite blue jacket? Anyway, I'm also wearing some tartan here. And the reason I've got a sash on, I don't know if you can see that. The reason I've got that on, because it was woven by the Loch Carron weavers, and it's an exclusive tartan for Peter Rabbit. It's a Peter Rabbit tartan that I'm wearing. Can you believe that? Why am I talking about Peter Rabbit? I'm about to tell you, and this is also a strange tale. But while I'm getting my bits and pieces together, of course, there he is. I think everybody would recognise that character. And hopefully most of you know the lady who produced these little books, Beatrix Potter, Helen Beatrix Potter, who was born in London in 1866. But both she and her brother always felt that the North Country was their home. And indeed, although they were born in London, their relatives were from up here in the north. Beatrix said, "I am descended from generations of Lancashire yeomen and weavers, obstinate, hard-headed, matter-of-fact folk." Many of their relatives lived in the Manchester area. Okay, so far so good. What on earth has this got to do with Charles Edward Stuart? Well, first of all, to show you this man, this is Beatrix's grandfather. He looks a charismatic chap. This is Edmund Potter, who actually came from humble beginnings and ended up owning the largest calico printing mill in the world in Derbyshire. But that's not what we're going to talk about either. He married this lady at the bottom here. This is Jessie Crompton. So this is Beatrix's grandmother. And it's the Crompton family that we're interested in. Let's get round to it. Now, Chorley Hall was the seat of the Chorley family, who apparently were Jacobite sympathisers, but in 1716, the estate was confiscated by the Crown. It was then sold to a member of the Crompton family at an auction at Preston Town Hall. Bonnie Prince Charlie is reputed to have stayed there. What? Now, Chorley Hall was a large house, or farm. It had a number of outbuildings. Again, this is all from the computer. One of the barns was supposed to have held Jacobite prisoners of war soldiers before being sent to Ireland in 1774. That I cannot make a comment on. So, Chorley Hall, Richard Chorley of Chorley Hall and his son Charles were on the losing side at the Battle of Preston and were detained following the Jacobite defeat. Charles died in prison and his father was executed, indeed beheaded as a traitor, and his lands confiscated. So let's come to what Beatrix in the book about her life. It is said that during the Second Rebellion, i.e. 1745, as the Jacobite army are moving south, that supposedly Bonnie Prince Charlie stayed at Chorley Hall overnight, although I cannot get any verification of this. And when I looked at the routes in various books, I'm not so sure about this at all. But this is, I'm only telling you what it says in the book about Beatrix's life. Now, unfortunately for Charles, if he did go there, the then owners in 1745 were not sympathisers to the Jacobites. You know, the property has changed hands. Indeed, this particular Abraham Crompton had a special abhorrence of Catholics and everything to do with them. And so on the march south, as I say, the Bonnie Prince Charlie arrived at the Hall. He didn't know that his father's ally no longer lived there, as he said. Abraham Crompton's in a bit of a quandary now, because he's thinking, well, this man might be my future king. Dear, maybe I shouldn't upset him. Should I allow him to stay? So apparently he did, but he wasn't allowed to dine with the prince. He was told he had to dine in the kitchen. And when Charles and his army left, napkins and a handful of silver were discovered hidden in the hall. They remained within the Crompton family, and both Beatrix and her father took great pleasure from the story. I can't verify any of this. Does the Crompton family still have these napkins and silver? It would be fascinating to try and find out. But you know, as they say, you come across little snippets to do with Charles Edward Stuart in the most unlikely places, don't you? Even with the wonderful lady that wrote those magical little books for us. So really, how true all that is, I don't know, but I thought I should share it with you, along with one or two of her exquisite illustrations. And Beatrix didn't just paint little animals with blue jackets on, did she? She was an extremely talented botanical illustrator, scientist, farmer, conservationist. The list is endless. Woo, where are we? Oh, we're nearly finished. You'll be pleased to know. Just two short bits now. Culloden, I have always been very moved by visiting there, as I'm sure many people have, but it's a site that is probably going to make me cry now, actually. It certainly moves me. I have written a number of poems about Culloden, and I'd like to read two associated poems here called Drummossy Moor. Now, I know if this goes out on YouTube that there will be wording underneath, and sometimes the wording is incorrect. So just to say that this first poem, the second to last line, stay white on the plaids, not plants. It's plaids as in tartan plaids, kilts, Plaids. Otherwise, the poem doesn't make sense, you'll see, but it's plaids, please. Drummossy Moor. Let's just have an image of it. Oh, that's the place where that dreadful battle took place in April 1746. Soft squeeze, the dark bog oozes blackness, bleeding earth tones of an artist's autumn palette. Bleached sphagnum and brittle heather stems, fade-dried grasses are mingled with gorse clumps. Wild and white, grey clouds are scudding, blue sky, grey sky, light levels yo-yo. Sidewinder snowflakes blown on a mean wind, spin dance o'er the moss, stay white on the plaids, no warmth for flakes to melt. I actually sat and wrote that at the battlefield as I did this second part of Drummossy Moor. Tears fall, dry fast by the cool wind. and skylarks high in azure, and skylarks high in azure blue sing a constant refrain. Let's just have a little look at some. There we are, reenactors there. My heart is bursting with pain, emotion, glossy myth and legend, crushed by the cold reality of death and dying. Flags fly on rattling masts, grass wavers, bends away from the constant wind. We walk, we photograph, look, and never fully understand. How can we get it in our 21st century world of gadgets and gizmos? Not characters from a bestseller, but here, each year, there will be more and more come to gather at the cairn and wonder on it all. Ooh, it's because I'm half Polish, I always blame it onto that. We Poles are quite emotional people. I cry at the least little thing. But here's something that to end with that may just bring a smile to your face, but perhaps not for the right reason. If you thought we've been hearing myth and before, then I bring you two little snippets that I found in a magazine, a Cumbria magazine, concerning the town of Sebba and its connection with Charlie. I'll just show you the picture first. We've got a black and white picture of the base of a building, some drain pipes, and can you see there's a cannon there sitting in the tarmac? Well, there are two small cannons, although I could only see one, embedded into the pavement tarmac next to a drain pipe outside this modest whitewashed house. They couldn't be much use to anyone at this present angle. How crazy, as they're pointing skywards. The cannons date from the Jacobite rebellion of 1745, and the house is said to have been a haven for escaping rebels, although two cannons parked outside must surely have given the game away. I want to go to Sebba and just go and see if one of those cannons is still standing there, but if you think that's a little bit outrageous, wait for this one. So we're in Sebba again. There's a house with a very large chimney. In fact, that's probably an old property that's been very much done up, looking at those windows. So we are looking at a building down Weaver's Yard. We can see the chimney in which Bonnie Prince Charlie is said to have hidden. Charles Edward Stuart came from Scotland to take over the English throne, but the English had other ideas and set out to kill him. The English and the Scots had a battle on Clifton Moor, which is just south of Penrith, and Bonnie Prince Charlie fled in disguise as a woman to the Isle of Skye. He was eventually captured in Carlisle in 1745. Oh dear, yes. I don't know who wrote that, but they need to sort out some facts. Yes, it is a very large chimney, but I suspect that in the winter of 1745, there would have been a great big roaring fire in there, as in fact probably all the year round. And nobody would be hiding up that chimney, would they? Gosh, ladies and gentlemen, I promised you a Jacobite Miscellany. I hope I've, well, trailed all sorts of subjects past you. Some of these subjects actually require a little further investigation. Those letters to Roland Wynne at Nostell Priory certainly could have some more work done on them, time permitting. But for now, Peter Rabbit and I would bid you farewell.